Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Hi there. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. Our guest today, and we talked about it briefly before we came on the air. It's been 45 years.
Oh boy.
And we're both like 24. So I'm still can't figure that out. When his first, and this is, I get tongue-tied, album, CD, whatever you want to call it, came out, Browne Sugar. And if you know that title, then you know who our guest is. Our guest is Tom Browne. And you heard as we were opening up the show, Funkin For Jamaica, which is a classic. And at the time, it was huge. It was a huge record. Tom, welcome to the show. How are you
Thanks
today?
so much. I'm doing real well. Thanks for having me, Darrell. I appreciate
Good.
it.
I appreciate you being here. My first question is, back in the day when you started, why did you choose the trumpet?
There was just something about the pomp, the regalness of the instrument. I started out playing classical trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just something about the sound of the instrument that drew me to it. Come to find out that my dad had played non-professional trumpet, but this is before I got into it before I even realized that. So we had that commonality there, but the instrument just drew me to it for its sound for some reason.
So back then, who were your influences?
Well, when back then when I started, I was very much into classical, but I was introduced to jazz in college, and that's where I really started having personal influences. My first trumpet teacher was a very well-known jazz trumpet player named Ray Copeland,
Mm-hmm.
so I definitely dug what he was about. But I guess I would Lee Morgan, Clifford Brown, Booker Little. Later on, Dizzy Gillespie. It took me a minute to get into Dizzy Gillespie. Everyone now, when you talk jazz, says, Miles Davis. Miles was never really one of my favorite players.
No?
No. Hey, Miles is a genius. Don't get me wrong. I will never discredit him as being a musical genius. But as far as trumpet players, he never was on the top of my list.
Wow. I find that strange, yet very unique in your answer. But I don't know. There's some things. I think there's 3 or 4 different stages of Miles. There's that early stuff. Don't get me wrong. Kind of Blue is just a tremendous record.
Yeah.
I got into We Want Miles and Tutu and that sort of later stuff. But then, don't get me wrong. I have a copy of Bitches Brew, and I still think it's 5 different guys playing 5 different songs. That's just me.
And he was like that. I mean, he definitely morphed with the times.
Right.
I mean, if he were still with us today, I doubt he'd be playing 7 Steps to Heaven and stuff. He'd be vibing with whatever's going on today.
That's so true. And I always tell this story. This is one of my favorite stories. So I got to go to a Miles Davis concert. It was in it was in the State Theater downtown, and we got front row center seats. And I bought a bunch of friends of mine. There was like, I don't know, 5 of us. So we're sitting front row center. Miles is playing, and this is in that stage when, if you're in his band, you get a solo.
Yep.
And he walks away.
Yep.
So literally, the solo starts, and I believe it's Kenny Garrett doing the solo.
Yep.
Next thing I know, Miles walks right to the edge of the stage, leans over, and goes, how am I doing? It's like you got 6 people sitting there like, I can't talk. Miles just spoke to us. And he kind of got that, I don't want to call it a sheepish grin, but he was a quirky kind of guy. But
Hey,
that's my Miles Davis story.
when I first met Miles, I was taken to a club in New York by my manager. George Benson was there, and he took me up to Miles, and I went to shake his hand. I said, "Real nice to meet you." And he grabbed my fingers and started rubbing my fingers. Like, what the hell, you know? So he does that for about a minute, and he looks and he says, "You need to practice more."
He was, and I've heard countless stories of I know a guy who you can actually see in this photo, who went up to meet him because he was just enthralled by him, and Miles wouldn't even open the door. And then he came out later on, and he knew who the guy was, and they sat down and had a conversation. He goes, "It was Miles. You just deal with it. That's all you have to do."
Yeah.
So I want to go back to this first project that you did, the Browne Sugar thing, which I think is one of your best, and I love The Closer I Get to You, Promises for Spring, Antoinette Like. Those are the songs that I love. And then comes number 2, which features the song we played in the beginning, Funkin For Jamaica. To me, diametrically oppose each other.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Why?
Well, let me explain first by saying how that song got on the album.
Right.
The album was Love Approach was basically finished and was handed in, and Arista Records said, "Man, it seems like it needs just one more song." So it was never planned to be on the album in the first place. I had been working on a jam. At the time I was living at my parents' house, and I just got a little Korg synthesizer, and I was working on this bass line and track to go along with it. And so I brought this vibe in the studio and showed the bass line to Bernard Wright, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I dig," and he started building on it. And when we handed that song in, nobody, and I mean nobody believed in it. Yeah, Arista was basically okay. It's the last song on the record. For us, Bernard and myself and Marcus, all the guys were. It was a hometown jam. Is all it was. It was just it was a musical thank you or acknowledgement to where the music was coming out of from me at that time, which was St. Albans, Hollis, Jamaica, New York. But nobody had any clue whatsoever what that song was going to do, or even if it was the right song. We just put it on the record basically. So it was something to do basically. That's the best I can say about it.
And I don't remember because I don't always remember the order of songs. Was that the first song released?
That was the first song that led that album. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
All right, I have another thing. This will tie into this other career that you have. I noticed on the Love Approach cover, you're sitting in a plane.
Yep.
Now knowing that you are a pilot, was that the intent, or was it just like,
Yeah, it's the whole approach concept was from the airplane. I retired from the airlines. I'm still flying charter today. I mean, it's my other career, it's my other passion. Still love to do it. I'm going to retire from it in October, for good. But yeah, that's just my other thing I enjoy doing.
How did you get into becoming a pilot?
My dad was a weather briefer for pilots. Started out at Kennedy. Well, before it was Kennedy, it was actually Idlewild. And then in the early 70s, he was transferred out to Islip, Long Island, to brief flight crews there. And so for as far back as I can remember, I've just been around airplanes, seen airplanes. Where we lived in St. Albans, you had planes coming into well, again, Idlewild at that point. On one side of the house, on the other side of the house, he had planes departing from LaGuardia. So all day long, I'm looking at these, these airplanes saying, "That's what I want to do. That's what I want to." It was just in my blood.
So is there a correlation between flying a plane and playing the trumpet? Is there
Mhm.
is one more relaxing? Or is it just two totally different silos, so to speak?
It's left brain, right brain. It really is. It's just they're contrast more than they correlate. Uh, the music for me was always a cool out. It was something to do. Like when my other friends were out playing ball, I was doing trumpet. I was doing music. It was just how I relaxed and chilled out. The flying is what I wanted to do all my life. And back in '78, when I got the record deal, I just had to make a decision. I said, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I could always, go back to flying, and so let me try this. It was just a chance I took to get into music.
Is it tough to manage both over the years?
I thought it would be because to have a career in both, I didn't see how the time lines up. But I will say my wife has always been beside me. She's always said, trust God, trust God. God will make a way. And it ended up that the doors were open for me to fly cargo, and pretty much on the schedule that I want. So even today, I'm flying for 2 weeks, and then I have 2 weeks off. And on those 2 weeks off, guess what I'm doing? I'm in my studio recording or on the road, or so it's God's kind of worked out the best in both worlds for me.
Man,
So I,
that is so interesting to me. In that it's like you get off the plane, you head home, and I got this song to work on, and I can do it for 2 weeks,
yeah,
and then I'm back on a plane.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I I applaud you for having a schedule and sticking to that schedule, because there's always some type of distraction or something that's going on in our lives that may take away from one or the other.
Well, no, I
Uh,
never, I never, I never said I get anything finished. I just, I have a schedule, but at the end of those 2 weeks, I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna have to work on it next time I come home. It is what
I-
it is.
oh, so in that case, if you're not finished with a song or project or whatever, and now you got to go away from it for 2 weeks, how do you get back into the project, or do you just remember what you've done and pick up right where you left off?
Well, it's gotten to the point where I've just learned to trust other people.
Hmm.
So I've got a music director, Denarius Thomas, who he does all my sending out music for gigs for me, all the coordination of that. I've just learned, hey Tom, you just can't do it all. You just especially as you're getting older. I mean, it's uh, um, if you want to have a more relaxation time in your life, then you got to kind of delegate. And so I've just learned to delegate. Even on this project I'm working on right now, I got Adam Hawley producing a track for me. And I'm home recording the trumpet part here in the next week or so. And then it's pretty much in his hands. I've just had to learn to do that. Um,
How,
so
how do
I'm,
you how do you learn to trust somebody else, especially with music, because it's your interpretation, it's your feeling, but now you're giving it to somebody else to kind of finish it off.
yeah, yeah. As long as you're speaking with someone who uh, you've had experience with and trust, as far as them knowing that you need to have input into it, but you've seen they have verifiable results. Like Adam, for example, has a string of number one
Yes.
smooth jazz hits.
Hmm.
He's proven himself over and over again as a bona fide good producer, and he's a genuinely good guy. I've worked with him, I toured with him a couple of times. Um, so in that case, I mean, it's gotten to the point now with smooth jazz radio where there's like 5 or 6 top producers, and those are the guys that the radio persons look for on each
Hmm.
project. And so it's almost better just to say, hey, can you help me with this? Pay them their fee, play your part, put your input into it, and just let them do their magic. It's gotten to that point, and it's always been like that to some degree. Even with the GRP stuff, it was Dave Grusin, who really had the name recognition out there, and until we
Hmm.
got going. So it's always been like that to a degree.
Okay, one of your latest projects is I always call them cover versions of the Cupid Shuffle.
Oh boy, I don't know how I got that done.
That
Uh,
That's interesting. Let's play a little piece of it so people can know what it's going on. Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, on the Jazz Flyte Podcast, here's Tom Browne's version of Cupid Shuffle. Cupid Shuffle by Tom
Cupid
Browne.
Shuffle.
Why did you choose that? I'm always interested in why artists choose someone else's song. Why did you choose Cupid Shuffle?
Mainly because one, it's everybody knows it. It's done at every wedding, it's played everywhere internationally. So there was a song recognition, and then just the whole idea that nobody's done it. It's nobody's said, hey, you know what? This is a hit sitting out there, just waiting for someone to do it instrumentally. What I decided to do on it really was not so much about soloing or showing jazz chops as it was about duplicating, what Cupid had done melodically. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the horn lines are just actually mimicking what he was singing, including the background parts and the front part, Mm-hmm. So I just found that to be a challenge. It did okay. It wasn't the smash that I was hoping it would be, but it came off as believable. That's the main thing. It came across like, hey, this isn't a jazz cat trying to just fake a version of Cupid Shuffle. This is actually Cupid Shuffle.
Do you try to do that with all the cover songs that you do? I remember The Closer I Get to You, which just was my favorite song. The radio station got mad at me because I played it an awful lot, and I probably shouldn't have, but I was the music director, so you had to deal with me. And you also did a cover of What's Going On.
Yeah.
What is the process in choosing that other person's song and then your interpretation?
That all of the early, first of all, that was on the Browne Sugar album, the first GRP record. All of the early GRP stuff for me was again left in the hands of the producer. That when Larry Rosen and Dave Grusin signed me, they basically had a bebop jazz trumpet player. Mm-hmm. But there was something that they found believable in my style that they felt could, and I almost hate to use this word today, crossover. Mm-hmm. Crossover kind of implies selling out, and that's never what I meant to do.
Right.
But mm-hmm. in order to quote unquote cross over, it implies that okay, you're not playing what you normally play, you're not doing what you normally do in order to reach a much wider audience. And so I give the credit to Dave on those tracks because he had the ear for pop music and knew those were popular songs and knew those were songs that if they were arranged a certain way and produced a certain way could reach that much more extensive jazz pop audience. Even that term has changed so much. I mean, fusion jazz and
right.
Whatever it's called,
And I think the biggest thing was because I was really into that stuff back then. It was just a question of I'll just say the jazz audience was not as large.
Yeah.
And they wanted to increase its popularity.
Yeah.
So that's why you had all of these songs. I mean, when Miles on I think it's the Tutu record, he does a Cindy Lauper, Time After Time.
Yeah, Time After Time.
And you just want to go, why?
Yeah,
but then, as the person playing the music for this radio station, you get that you want to get more listeners, more people paying attention to what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Was that a personal fight with you? And I don't mean fight, but was it tough to convince you to do that? Or
No, it wasn't because first of all, I didn't have a direction at that time. I didn't in some instances, I still don't know my direction. I guess Jamaica Funk solidified it a lot
Oh,
more,
yeah, most definitely, yeah.
But I was pretty much in the hands of whatever Dave saw as a direction. Um, I fight with people today about this whole smooth jazz direction because
Yep.
they well, who's your favorite smooth jazz player, or who's it? Roy Ayers, or Grover Washington. I mean, because I'll tell people they were playing smooth jazz well before it was
Yeah.
even called smooth jazz.
Right.
So, but that's a whole nother
Yes, that's a whole
story,
nother
and
discussion.
you know,
That's a whole nother show.
yeah,
Uh, I just, it was always you. Excuse me. You mentioned those guys back then, and it was a good time for the music. It was
yeah,
great
yep,
because you had a whole bunch of people that were all very good, and they all tried, and they all put out very very good music. There's a couple of them that they put out good, mediocre music, and they had the right marketing,
yep,
and their songs went further than. But then there are other people who didn't get the same notoriety, who didn't get the
yep,
same publicity.
yep,
That because that was always a great part about my job. I'd get stuff in, I go, I've never heard of this person, and then the next thing you know,
yep.
Sundays were always my day to okay, I'm gonna sit here and listen to new music all day long, and you find this track, and you're like, whoa! And I think the GRP label was one of those labels that just promoted everybody,
Yeah.
and they
Yep.
had a bunch of people. What just tell me about, if you can, that roster at the time when you were there, because it's you, it's Larry
And,
Rosen, it's Dave Valentine, and I'm
and
going off the top of
Angie,
my
Angie
George
Bofill, who
Angie
just
Bofield just passed away.
yep.
Um, what was it like being a part of that?
It was the young and energetic vibe. Um, it was a bunch of very talented players who had the youthful energy and just wanted to connect. But that one thing GRP did very, very well, and especially when they went digital and had that whole digital
Mm-hmm.
marketing thing
Yep.
behind them,
Mm-hmm.
uh, was connect. I mean, they were probably the premier quote unquote pop jazz label that was out at the time. This is long before Shanachie and all these other labels were even
Right. Right.
conceived of. I think the only other label, well, CTI did it on a different level, but
Yes.
it was more, with Benton and Freddie Hubbard and Hubert Laws, and
Mm-hmm.
but it was more not bebop, but it was more mainstream
Right.
jazz
Yes.
than GRP was. GRP was more of a pop thing,
Yeah.
and I think the only other label at the time was Bob James had a label, and I'm trying to
Happen
remember
Z.
Tappan Z.
Yes.
Yeah, they were kind of doing it also. So it was very nouveau. It was very on target for what was happening at the time. And just like you said, back then, radio station, if it was good music, they'd play it. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
uh, you you could you could hear you could hear the Beatles on a station, and then right behind the Beatles, hear Grover Washington, and
Yes.
then right behind that, hear Earth, Wind and Fire. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just if it was good music, it was getting played.
It's getting played.
Uh, I kind of miss those days, to be honest with you. But,
Don't get me wrong, you are not alone in that
yeah,
thought, sir. You are not
yeah.
alone at all. What so I'm still fighting with this whole playing the trumpet, getting CDs and music out and flying. I just at what point did you train to be a pilot, and was your music career going on at the same time?
No, no.
No?
My flight training. I got my first license when I was 17. So it's back like 70. I don't want to give my age away here, but I already said I was 70.
It was a few years ago.
Yeah, a few years ago. Um, I guess around 73 or so, and so I got my private, my commercial, my multi-engine. I did that all. My parents paying and my having little jobs paying. And once you become a flight instructor, you're now at the point of making money yourself and
Hmm.
starting to build hours. And so I went through that for a couple of years and got my first charter flying job. Um, and from charter went to the airlines, and became chief pilot and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a building process. Like everything else today, the young people, Gen Z getting into this aviation thing wants everything now. So there's a bunch of people who are in $200,000 debt because they built up all the hours in like 2 years or whatever. Wow. No, I just took my time and had a paper route and paid for a lesson here and there, and went from there.
I have a very odd question, and I only think of it if I'm on a plane. Do you play your own music for your flights?
Do you want to see people exiting the plane in a mass panic?
I am sure no one be exiting the plane if you're playing some of the stuff that you have released.
I actually had someone do that. He unfortunately passed away several years ago, but he was a senior check airman for UPS. He was a 747 check airman. His name was Jerome Lee. He's a dear friend of ours, and he flew for early on American Inter-Island Airlines down in the Caribbean. And so here we are. My wife and I fly into St. Thomas, and we're going to one of the islands at the time, and Jamaica Funk was out. And the plane on that door closed, and over the PIIM, and there was a sheer look of panic on the people's.
Really?
Yeah.
Can't imagine that. Speaking of your music, let's take a trip down another musical lane. Let's play Radio Vibe, which features
Jeanette Harris.
Right. So we're going to listen to that right now on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. That's Radio Vibe on the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Our guest is Tom Browne. Tom, we were talking just briefly.
Yeah.
It's totally up to you. You want to tell this story that you were telling me about you meeting your father-in-law?
Yeah, about my grandfather-in-law.
Okay.
So because you were asking about people's reaction on the plane, and I could kind of mirror that with this situation about how people react when they found out I was a musician. In general. So I was, dating my fiance at that time, who's now been my wife for 45 years. But I'm meeting her grandfather. So I'm extending my hand. Nice to meet you. He grabs my hand and he puts his finger in my face. He says, "Listen, you know hurt my little girl." It's like stern, Dominican warnings, like you know hurt her. And that's pretty much, say you're a jazz musician, and that's pretty much the kiss of death with some people.
Did you find that, especially back then, because there was always the argument that you're not playing jazz, and I always go, well, if I remember correctly, there was Charlie Christian, who Wes Montgomery learned from him, and then George Benson learned from Wes Montgomery.
Yep.
So how can you tell me it's not jazz when the root cause is teaching me what to do? I never understood that. So do you get conversations of, well, you're not really playing jazz, you're playing?
Oh yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Honestly, you don't. You stay true to the form as best you can. I'll explain to people where the linkage is. I mean, because to me, if it's improvisational, if it's got, if you can trace back the roots of the music, right, all the way back to the two, of jazz and blues, all that came out of slave song. So if you can trace it back to our heritage, okay, then I'm not really concerned as much about what people's everyone's got their interpretation of what quote unquote jazz is. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to what the master said, what Dizzy said, what it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that sway. All that was said and established. As long as it can trace back linearly to where this music came from, I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. Now if it traces back to like some dance that was done in Hungary or Belgium or something like that, that again is a whole nother conversation.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. And that's what's going on today. I mean, jazz is being retitled. And I do have issues with that. Everybody has contributed to it. Everybody has placed input in the music, but the foundation of the music came from only one place, and that's, to me, that's never going to change.
Mm-hmm. It is good to hear, for me, that it always boils down to that root thing. So I think if it comes from that root, if that flower grows,
yep,
it's all the same thing. It all comes from the same thing. There are many different interpretations. And some of the stuff that you've done, we've mentioned Miles here. I don't think there's anybody more, what's the word I want to use? He had more flavors than Baskin Robbins has ice cream flavors.
Yeah, I mean, look at Herbie Hancock and Headhunters, and
yeah. As a matter of fact, speaking of Herbie, so he was in town last year for our Tri-C Jazz Fest. And I saw a friend of mine on the way in who was all excited to see him. And I go, have you ever seen Herbie before? He goes, no. I'm like, just take it all in.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are lots of flavors of Herbie Hancock.
Yep.
And I said, don't be surprised if he doesn't play your flavor, because he's got, for example, if Tom's going to do a show, how do you go through your catalog to decide what you're going to play for that 90-minute show? Well, he's got 9,000 songs.
Yeah.
Really? He did a Wayne Shorter cover. He did do Headhunters. And you just sit there, and I've heard all of that. I saw him down in at the Capitol Jazz Festival a few years ago, and the wife had never seen him before, and she's like, "What is this?" I go, "Just listen,
mm-hmm.
and you'll enjoy it." He will play something that but I've always found it interesting, the selection of songs that you use when you are playing a concert. Tom, this has been so neat for me. We got a bunch of fans out there who listen, who now want to find out how they can follow Tom Browne, and how can we do that?
Best way is you can catch me on Facebook at Tom Browne Jamaica Funk. God, I can't get away from that.
But it's good though. It's a very good. It was a what?
It was a blessing and a curse. It was both.
Yes,
it was both.
So it's Tom Browne Jamaica Funk.
Tom Browne Jamaica Funk on Facebook. Definitely follow me there. Or you can go to my personal site, which is tombrowne.org. Browne's with an E. Tombrowne.org.
Yeah, I forgot that one time and trying to send you an email, and then it dawned on me there's an E on the end.
That's where my check went.
Yeah, if you're getting a check from me, there's not much in front of the decimal point. And so what's new? What's coming up for you?
Well, this Adam Hawley project, I launched my own label about a year and a half ago called B-Horn Records. So everything I'm doing now is coming out of that project, that label, and just trying to keep the vibe going, trying to knock on some doors, open some doors, basically.
We'll do our very best to get your music out there and make people aware of it. I'm going to ask might be a touchy question. Why did you start your own label?
Oh, yeah, that isn't.
We don't have to talk about it.
No. I just that is the one area that I have to always believe in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than spending whatever time I have left searching for, number one, for labels to say, oh yeah, we still believe in you. And then number two is like, well, we want you to do this kind of music, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just easier today, and I'm looking at all the folks doing it. It's just easier to do it yourself. Uh, all the musicians I know have like I got here like a little studio in their home where you can record your own stuff. And it's gotten so easy to put out quality stuff from your home now. It's not just like garage recordings anymore. I'm talking about top quality digital product.
Right.
So as you were mentioning before, it's all in the marketing. It's not even in the label name anymore. It used to be that a label name meant something.
Right.
I don't know very many people that pick up a record nowadays and say, "Wow, this is on Warner Brothers. It's got to be a great,"
Right.
No one's even looking at the label name anymore.
As someone told me, and if I mention the name, you will know who I'm talking about. He says, "It's just good to be in control of me."
Yeah.
And what I do, I can decide when I want to send stuff out. I don't always have to do a 12-song CD. I can do one song a month, and then in month 11 I can then release the CD.
Yep.
It is so different now than it was back when, and I'll say this, when we were kids.
Yep.
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. As I said, if there's anything that Jazz Flyte can do, you have my email addresses, you have all my contact information. Send it. We'll pass it on to our fans on our social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram. And don't get me wrong, I hold the right to call you back later on once you got some more stuff out. Once that project is done, we'd like to talk to you again.
That sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks to all the fans for supporting the music too. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. You've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. We will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy these stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.